Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, May the 4th, 2020, and this is a Moscow City Council meeting, a regular agenda this evening. Thank you all very much. If you would please rise with me, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, item number 1, public hearing on the Howard Street right-of-way vacation was pulled from our agenda this evening. We will bring it back to full council in the future some point in time. I do not have a date as of yet, but with that, we will go on to item number 2, which is 1110 South Main Street Lot Division. We've got Amy Henrich with us to do a presentation. Amy, good evening.
Good evening, Your Honor, council members. Let me get my screen up here. I think you can all see it. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So tonight we have a lot division request for 1110 South Main Street. The applicant is requesting a lot division in order to separate two existing duplexes into their own parcel. The existing lot as it stands is 60,057 square feet. The new lots would be 51,833 square feet and 8,224 square feet in size. The subject property is located within the multifamily zoning district, or R4. Within the multifamily zoning district, minimum lot fronts are required to be 50 feet. Minimum lot area is 5,000 square feet. And the setbacks are 15 feet for the front, 20 feet if the garage faces the street, 20 feet for the rear, and the side, 5 feet minimum, with the two sides combining no less than 15 feet. The proposed lot division would meet all these setback requirements. This survey was completed by Rimrock Consulting, showing the new property lines to be recorded. And the staff recommendation is to take any public comment and approve the lot division request with no conditions.
Thank you, Amy. I have seen no public comment on this whatsoever. Have you, Gary?
No, sir, I have not, and I haven't been informed by the city clerk that she has received any either.
Okay, questions for Amy from council? I see nobody raising their hands. Okay, what would the council like to do? Arthur?
I would move that we approve this lot division request.
Gina?
Second.
I did see it. Okay, a question for you, Art.
Yeah,
Was this to approve the lot division request with no conditions?
correct.
Is that how you understood it as well, Gina?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we have here is a motion by Art and a second by Gina to approve the lot division requested with no conditions. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Ann.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. 6-0 on that one. Thank you, Amy, for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 3, Paradise View Additional Final Subdivision Plat. We have Michael Ray with us tonight. Mike, how are you?
Doing well, Your Honor.
Okay, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. See my presentation?
I see it on my screen, yes.
Excellent. So before you tonight, we have a review of Paradise View Edition Final Plat. This is on behalf of Nils Peterson with the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust. This is the subject property, northeast corner of Nursery Street and Palouse River Drive. You can see Powers Avenue here. This photo's from 2 years ago, so there's been some development that has occurred in the area. This is actually Palouse Charter School. The extension of Southview Avenue has been extended to Alice Street and Indian Hills Drive here. Sunny Court's a cul-de-sac. You've got Campus Crest development here to the west, and then development on the south side of Palouse River Drive is primarily commercial in nature. So just a brief background as what's occurred up to this point. June 26th of last year, the Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing, and that was for the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust. And it was subdividing the 1.5 acre parcel located at 1924 Nursery Street into 17 parcels. They ranged in size from a little over 1,800 square feet to a little over 5,000 square feet in size. The proposal was for 12 twin home lots, 4 townhouse lots, 1 single family lot. And part of the development included a public alley that transected the property in the middle, as well as an existing stormwater detention pond that was put in as part of the Indian Hills 8th Edition subdivision, which this lot happens to be within. The commission recommended approval of the preliminary plat with no conditions, and then that advanced on to City Council, who conducted the public hearing on August 19th of last year and approved the preliminary plat for Paradise View Edition with no conditions as well. So this is the final plat that's been submitted on behalf of the applicant. You can see this is Nursery Street here to the west, Powers Avenue with the cul-de-sac here to the north, and this is Palouse River Drive here to the south. Existing stormwater detention pond here in the southeast corner. You've got the alley that ends up transecting the property through the middle, terminates on the eastern boundary, and then also heads north into a T intersection here and egresses out on Powers Avenue. This is the single family lot here in the northwest corner. These represent twin home lots here, as well as these 4 here on Powers. These are townhouse lots that front Nursery Street here in the southwest corner. And then that would wrap this up into twin home lots along Palouse River Drive here to the south. Just a closer view of the northern portion of the plat, that single family lot, and then these twin home lots here. And then the southern portion as well with the townhouse lots, and then the twin home lots here, 5 through 10, and the stormwater detention. And the applicant did submit a phasing plan as part of this. He's intending to construct a single family home, hopefully this year. And then phase 2 would be the remainder of the development. So staff has reviewed the final plat for compliance with city and state code requirements, found it to be in conformance. The commission did review the final plat earlier this year on March 11th, and they recommended approval to City Council. And staff's recommendations, the council approved Paradise View Edition final plat, and I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to wait until the screen comes back. Okay, questions for Mike from the council?
Not a question, if I may. Not a question, just a comment that I think this is really great to see the Housing Trust moving forward with this. And I appreciate your work on it. I think it's a really great thing to see move forward.
Well, one of the things I'll say to council, and I'll come right back to you, Art, in a minute, is the fair and affordable housing thing that we've been working on diligently over these last number of years. This is a part of that, and it fits within that scope. Art?
I was just going to say this is in exact conformance of what we approved by way of a preliminary plat. Nothing has changed, so I think I would move to approve the Paradise View Edition final plat.
Okay, we got Maureen's got the second before you did, Sandra and Ann. So, Ann, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. We've got a motion by Art and a second by Maureen to approve the Paradise View additional plat as it is. And so I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Ann. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. This kind of, item number 4 ties into this. It's the next thing, and council has seen these before. Paradise View Edition Development Agreement. We got Bob Avell with us. Bob, you out there somewhere? There he is. Hello, Bob. I can't hear you. We need to get your volume on.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. Let me get my screen up and going for you.
Okay. Agreement on review public improvement.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, it's on the screen, Bob. Thank you.
All right. So today I'm here to talk to you about the Paradise View Development Agreement. This development agreement goes along with the plat that the previous item just discussed. In case we're still not clear on where this is at, this is a vicinity map of Moscow showing the subject property down in the Indian Hills 9th subdivision. This is an overview of the proposed public improvements that are going to be required with the subdivision. Includes a paved alley, installing water and sewer and storm services. And not shown here are some off-site sewer connections. The sewer main that runs down the alley will then turn south and head down and connect into a sewer main in Nursery Street. This development plan lays out the requirements for the phasing of the subdivision. So shown here is the phasing plan for the subdivision. Up here in the northwest corner is phase 1, which is going to be one single family lot, one single family house, with the rest of the development being phase 2. The agreement talks about the public improvements required, the ability to postpone public improvements if the developer so chooses, the terms for the warranty and the security at the end of the development to cover the public improvements the city adopts. It also talks about the parkland dedication, which those requirements were met with the Indian Hills 9th subdivision. And it discusses the phasing plan. And I guess at that point, I will see if anybody has any questions. We've seen a few of these already, so.
Okay. Well, once we get your screen back up so I can see.
I gotta do that
Councilor
again,
Bob.
don't I?
Okay, there's my counselors. Counselors have questions for Bob on the development agreement. Art?
Bob, is there anything in here that's kind of outside the normal development agreement that we go through with all developments like this? Or is it pretty much just our standard?
Pretty much the only thing that's really different outside of our standard one is the phasing plan. Probably 50% of the subdivisions have phasing plans. And then the parkland dedication not being included as part of the development agreement are probably the only two differences that we would normally see from what we would normally see in a subdivision.
Thanks.
Okay. Brandy?
Bob, are all of the public improvements required to be completed before phase 1 can be initiated?
No, that's part of what's laid out in the phasing, when they lay out the phasing, that's part of what's laid out is that they're only required to complete the public improvements for each phase as they go along. So once the public improvements are concluded for phase 1, they can then start getting building permits on any lots that they sell.
And then similar to Art's question, and that's pretty typical when projects do have phases, that the public improvements occur in conjunction with those phases.
That's correct, yep.
Okay. Other questions for Bob from council. Art.
Well, since nobody's overwhelming with questions, I move we approve the development agreement with the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust for Paradise View addition.
Brandy, seconded.
Correct.
Any further discussion from council? Okay, with that, I'll move on. There was a motion made by Art and a second by Brandy to approve the development agreement with the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust for Paradise View Addition. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
and Ann.
Aye.
Okay. And with that, it'll take us concurrently into another phase of Paradise View. Paradise View Additional Monumentation Agreement. Bob Boubel is with us again. He's done these, and you've seen these several times from Bob. So Bob, you have the floor again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me share my screen and pull up my presentation again. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. So with this item, I'm going to talk about the Paradise View Addition Monumentation Agreement. Again, this is a vicinity map of the subject property down in on the intersection of Nursery and Palouse River Drive. This is a view of the plat. We've already seen this before. This plat lays out all the internal monumentation that needs to be done within the subdivision. Each one of these black dots are property pins that need to be placed. So just an overview of the agreement. The state law requires that developers, in order to file a final plat, they have to set the property pins within the final plat, or they are allowed to postpone those setting those property pins if they enter into a recorded agreement with an agency such as the City of Moscow. The agreement lays out the requirement for the security that's going to be required. The city will hold on to that security for until the end of the subdivision, and then it is released once we verify that all the pins have been set and the developer would like to start selling lots. The security is mentioned in the agreement, and it is going to be 120% of the estimated cost of to set the monumentation. And with that, I will see if anybody has any questions. And I will share my.
Okay, questions for Bob? It's pretty self-explanatory. We've seen one of these several weeks back with another one of these types of agreements. Gina?
Your Honor, I move that we approve the monumentation agreement with Moscow Affordable Housing Trust for Paradise View Addition.
Okay, Maureen beat you again, Sandra, so Maureen seconded that. Okay, we've got a motion by Gina and a second by Maureen to approve the monumentation agreement with the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust for Paradise View Addition. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Ann. Ann went somewhere. I'm not sure. I think Art's trying to bring her back. Have you got her on the phone? Ask her if she said aye. She said aye. So there we have it via the phone call. So Art's trying to bring Ann back up with us. Thank you very much, Bob. Nice presentations. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 6, which is Itani Park Pathway Phase 2 Bid Result and Contract Award. We got Nate Sewer with us. Nate, you out there somewhere?
I sure am, Your Honor.
There he is. There he is.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can, Nate. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, in just one moment, you'll see my shared screen. Can everyone see that?
Well, I sure do.
Excellent. Okay, so this is a presentation of the bid results for the Atani Park Pathway Phase 2 project. This project is located on the east edge of Moscow between Atani Drive and Crestview Drive. A little bit of a backstory on this. The first phase of the pathway leading from Atani Drive to the playground pad was constructed in 2019, but because of a tight budget at the time in the park's capital budget, it was necessary to break these into 2 phases. And so this is the second phase, which will complete the connection to the north. So there will be an ADA compliant pathway all the way from Atani Drive to Crestview Drive. You can see here the construction details. On your left is the existing playground and a small section of the existing sidewalk that was drawn in. And we have running from left to right on your screen, the proposed 6-foot wide sidewalk. And what is not shown on this is there's some additional storm drain modifications that were necessary to pick up some foundation drains and things that are daylighting in this area and take them all the way out to the street. So that will take place underneath the pathway and is necessary to make sure that it doesn't stay as swampy as it has been in the past. The bidding was not as favorable this time. We solicited bids from 5 concrete companies and received 2 responsive bids. Bids were from Germer Construction and Knox Concrete. The engineer's estimate for the project was $33,196.75. And the apparent low bidder was Germer Construction with a bid of $43,545. Now, while this is higher than the engineer's estimate, we're still more than $10,000 under the budget for this project. When I spoke with the project managers, both of the project managers for Germer Construction and Knox Concrete, their concerns were just that because the park is such a high visibility and high care area, that they were going to need to spend a little more time, and that was what was driving the prices up from the engineer's estimate. Because it is still well within the project budget, our staff recommendation is the acceptance of the low bid from Germer Construction and to award the contract amount of $43,545 and authorize staff approval of construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% or provide staff further direction. Are there any questions on that right now?
Okay. Sandra.
I apologize if this is in there. I tried to look it up and it was kind of hit and miss the last couple of days getting the research in that I wanted. Is there lighting to go along with this? Is that part of this, or is that something that may or may not come along later?
There's not lighting with this portion of the project. That would have to be something that was done at a later date.
Thank you.
Brandy.
I'm not sure that the answer to this is very clear, but do you know why the budgeted amount is so much higher than the engineer's estimate? Is that just a matter of back when the budget is set, there are so many unknowns and things have changed, or?
It's partly that, because the budgeted amount tends to factor in design and a few other things because of during our transition where we're taking more projects into house, that we're able to stretch that budget dollar a little further. But if we had to pay an outside consultant to do that, it would quickly eat into the rest of that funds. And this project was being budgeted at the time that transition was happening.
Okay, so some of this, with this bid being over the engineer's estimate and it's still under the budget, is because of doing some of this work in-house has ultimately saved somewhere around $10,000 from what it would have been had it all been outsourced.
Yes, and the first phase was done was outsourced to a private engineering firm. So.
Okay, Maureen.
Well, it would sure be great to have that completed, so.
Yeah.
Maureen, you had your hand up as well.
Brandy had my questions.
Okay, so Brandy asked the question. That was a good question to ask, too. Okay, other questions for Nate? Brandy?
I'm ready to make a motion if no one has any other questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I move to accept the low bid from Germer Construction, Inc. and award the contract in the amount of $43,545 and authorize staff approval of construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
Gina?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Brandy and a second by Gina to approve and accept the low bid from Germer Construction and award the contract in the amount of $43,545 and authorize staff's approval of construction change orders in the amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount to not exceed $4,354.50. And Brandy, I'll start to roll with you.
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Maureen?
Aye.
Gina?
Aye.
And Ann?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Well, we have Nate with us again, Rotary Park Equipment Pad bid result and contract award. We got Nate with us again. Nate, you have the floor again, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, in one moment, you should be seeing, does everyone see that shared screen?
Yep, it's up there.
Excellent. Okay, so this is also a bid result. This is another parks project that was, it's going to be very similar in the vein of what you saw like at Lola Clyde Park with a pad and a pathway. So this project is located at the northwest corner of Public and Orchard Avenue. And let's see here if you can see this picture. Between those trees, you kind of have bracketed the old playground structure. This would be a project to remove the existing playground structure, border, bark, and some of the unsuitable soil underneath, and pour a new reinforced concrete pad to receive new playground equipment. And it will also include the reorientation of the pathway running to this location so that it can ADA compliant slopes. The history back in 2017 to address the problem of having a lot of dedicated parkland that hadn't yet been developed. The city council authorized the use of Hamilton funds for parkland development. Resolution 2017-17 authorized these funds for purchase and installation of playground equipment and the construction of ADA compliant pathways. So as I mentioned earlier, the previous park project that was built using Hamilton funds was Lola Clyde Park. The construction details you can see here. On the north, this is Vandal Drive. On the right side is Orchard Avenue, and to the south out of the screen is Public. This would include the construction, removing of all the existing playground equipment and then constructing a 62 by 42 foot reinforced concrete pad that will hold all the playground equipment and also get the rubber tiles for safety. And we would be relocating the the pathway to ensure that we can meet ADA compliant grades. A similar bidding situation, we solicited bids from 5 companies and received 2 responses, also from Germer Construction and Knox Concrete. The engineer's estimates were $58,548 base with a $12,000 additional alternative. This additional alternative was the removal of the playground equipment because the budget was such that we knew it might be necessary for the parks to self-perform that work if the bids were not favorable, which they were not. The project budget is $80,000, and the low bidder on this project was Knox Concrete, who had a bid of $82,252 for the base and $5,000 for the additional alternative, for a total of $88,252. Some of the things, seeing these bids come in, we knew we immediately needed some cost reduction options because we're above the engineer's estimate and above budget. So the first one that comes to mind is rejecting the additional alternative, which has a cost savings of $5,000 from that $88,000 amount that was quoted. And the second one was a an experiment of mine, we had typically in these parks projects gone for a repair rather than a protection option. And a lot of the parks have, very manicured, very nice lawn areas. And so we always end up doing a significant amount of damage to them with construction equipment. We had previously just repaired that damage. And so with this bid, we were attempting to price out what it would cost, put in protection instead. And the thought was that we would be running about similar costs. What we found out was that the ground protection option was almost 10 times as expensive as the repair option. And so after seeing the bid results come back, we were able to negotiate with the apparent low bidder and essentially came to an understanding that we would be switching back to a repair. And this represents a savings of slightly over $9,000 on the project amount. A combination of that and some other unit price, or not unit prices, but unit amounts that we can try to keep as low as possible. We anticipate being able to bring the project construction cost range in the $67,000 to $73,000 range, depending on how much of certain items we're able to remove. And we'll do this through change orders if we're allowed to award the project. This has already been discussed with the apparent low bidder, and they're on board with that option. So because of the cost reduction options that we were able to secure, our recommendation is to accept the low base bid from Knox Concrete, reject the additional alternative bid, and award the contract in the amount of $82,252 and authorize staff approval of construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% or provide further direction. And then I'd take questions.
Okay, questions for Nate. Maureen.
Nate, I'm just assuming that if we're putting in an ADA accessible pathway, that in fact there'll be ADA accessible play equipment at the playground as well.
Yes, there will be. And David Shaw can speak a lot more in detail to that. But yes, there are various different ages and accessibility levels for the swing bays and the playground equipment.
I think, is David with us? I think he is. I'll come to you in just a second, Ann. Is Dave out there? Because I seen him earlier.
Yes, I am, Mayor Lambert.
Would you like to speak to that, David, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Councillor Laughlin, yes, to answer your question, the playground we ordered that council approved a few months ago is all ADA compliant. This pathway will just ensure ADA accessibility to that playground.
Okay, Maureen, did that answer your question then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Ann, I'll go to you now because you had your hand up.
Thank you. Hey, Nate, what component of the project was the add alternate that now will not be included?
It was the removal, having the contractor remove the existing playground equipment.
Gotcha.
Something that can be, it's a little bit outside the scope of what our parks team usually does, but they're comfortable enough with the structures that they can do that on their own.
Great.
So that was a really generous offer from them.
Okay, I'll go to Sandra, then come to you, Brandy.
So is the playground equipment not ADA accessible? I mean, I know the pathway isn't there, but the equipment itself, is it not ADA compliant right now?
I believe currently?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe there's any equipment that would be ADA accessible in this portion of the structure. There's another structure in this park that is, but this section that's to be replaced is not.
Okay, thanks.
Brandy.
Does the moving from the ground protection to the repair, does the Knox in this case, do they do the repair or does that fall to the Parks Department?
We'll split the duties. Knox will take care of the what we call mass grading, getting the bulk of the ground flattened and returned to its original grade. And then the Parks Department will come in and do the fine seeding or sodding, what is needed to do to return it back to its original condition.
Maureen.
Thank you.
Do we recycle that play equipment or do we just dump it?
I don't believe we have any opportunity to recycle it. There's some plastic borders that may be able to be recycled, but at this point in time, it's in pretty poor condition. there's metal from the swings that could be recycled as well.
Oh, excuse me, I think that I misspoke, because it wasn't like thinking about recycling it, but I was thinking of allowing it to like, go to somebody, either sell it or give it to somebody who wants it. It's the reuse of it is really what I thought of.
Okay.
David Schott's got his hand up. I'm gonna let David
Thank you,
answer
David.
that, Nate.
Oh,
Go ahead.
hi, Mayor Lambert, thank you. Councilor Laughlin, the playground is being replaced because it's outlived its service life. I wouldn't be comfortable giving it to somebody else or surplusing it. Over the years, it's become brittle with the UV exposure. The wood, after 20 years, it's hard to anchor anything into it. We weren't planning on salvaging. There might be some stuff we might be able to surplus. We'll kind of play that by ear as we're doing demolition of the play equipment. But ultimately, the majority of it, we're just going to dispose of.
Okay, Art.
Yeah, relative to the approval, if we approve 82 something thousand, but if the actual amount turns out through negotiation, and thank you for doing that, Nate, but much less at 67 to 73,000, do we just pay out the 67 to 73 as opposed to the 82 that we're actually approving here?
Yes, there are a couple of ways we can do it. We can either completely remove the bid items from the contract using a change order and replace them. For example, this would fit well with the gravel access road, replacing it with the repair. And then the other option is to simply just opt out of using certain bid items, such as, and that would be for more like the soft spot repair and the 1.25 inch aggregate that you see on that. And so
in other words, we just take care of that administratively after the contract is awarded.
Exactly.
Okay.
Sandra.
Do you have an approximate of what the lifespan is for this new kind of park equipment we're using?
I would have to defer to David on that one.
David, you got an answer for us on that? There's David. Okay, David.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lambert. Councilor Kelly, I don't have the information right in front of me, but we're looking at 20 plus years on the new playground equipment, 25, 30, somewhere in there. They last quite some time.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
One thing I'll say about playground equipment, then I'll come to you here in just a second, Brandy, is if a playground lasts 20 years, can you imagine how many kids have played on that thing over those years? It's going to be stressed out and a little bit beat up. Brandy, I'll go to you next.
Is there any reason why we would not want to, change the action to award the contract in the higher amount of the new range that you've negotiated rather than the 82?
It would essentially require us to just reject all bids and rebid to be able to do it that way. So that's the disadvantage of versus trying to do it administratively and reduce costs that way.
That's
Okay.
a good question,
Good
though,
answer.
Brandy. That's a good question to ask. Okay. So how would count Arthur, and then I'll come to you, Gina.
Well, I think I'm going to do the same thing Gina was going to do, and I would move to accept a low base bid and reject the add alternate bid from Knox Concrete LLC and award the contract in the amount of $82,252 and authorize staff approval of construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
Okay, and Gina, I'm guessing you were second that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Gina to accept the low bid from Knox Concrete and award the low bid and award the contract in the amount of $82,252 for the base bid only and authorize staff approval of construction change orders in an amount to not exceed 10% of the contract or $8,225.20. With that, I'll start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Aye.
And Ann.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Nate and David.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You bet. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 8, which is ordinance amending Title 5, Chapter 4, Moscow City Code regarding water regulations. We have Tyler Palmer with us this evening. Hello, Tyler. Put his volume button on so we can hear Tyler.
Good evening, Your Honor. I'm really happy to be here. This is something we've been working on for quite some time, and we're really excited to bring before the council. It's one of those things that can be a little bit wonky, but it seems like digging into code sometimes can feel kind of esoteric, but this is something that really does have real world effects and real world impacts. So Title 5, Chapter 4 has a lot to do. It's in our water code, and it speaks specifically to water meters. And when water meters are required, how we determine what's required. And what we found is that a lot of the conflict that we'd have or difficult situations we found ourselves in as we dealt with developers or property owners trying to develop a property or remodel a property, a lot of them came back to this specific code. We would have trouble trying to interpret the code. And really what it boiled down to is we had a code that at one point had been very effective, but it was, as all things, that it had evolved. And we realized that it was too rigid and didn't reflect the nuance of our current building and development practices. And so in the spring of 2019, we convened a committee to look at what might be some good, meaningful, useful updates to this code to bring it more in line with the current practices and the current types of development that we're seeing. Just for example, we see a lot more mixed use development happening now where you have people that want to come in and they may want to have, a restaurant downstairs or commercial downstairs and some residential upstairs. Or, the council recently has taken up the accessory dwelling units and the ability to add accessory dwelling units a lot. So those sorts of things that we've seen happen within the development world. And so we wanted to clarify, provide some flexibility within this, both for the city and for the developers, so that we could cooperate with property owners and determine the best metering strategy for their particular situation and for their particular property. So over that process, we had, one of the things about code development is we have to be really careful as we develop code and throw every potential scenario at it and try and really think through, okay, does this work and does it accomplish what we hope to accomplish? So that involves getting people involved from our engineering, our legal department, our metering department, our water department. And so just a lot of different people are involved in trying to make sure that we come away with something that's congruent and that accomplishes what we hope to accomplish. And we think that we've done that. It was a long process. We went through a lot of reviews, had a lot of eyeballs on this. So with this code, we really think that we have put together something that provides clarity, flexibility, protects the city's water system, but also considers the needs of the property owners in our community. And it also, through that process, we go through and we clean up the entire code. So if there are things that seem to be vague or not well defined or not in keeping with the times, we update those as well. And so there are things that you'll see as we go through this, like when are internal water meters allowed, if they are? When is relocation of a meter an option? It clarifies provisions for account suspensions, those sorts of things that just bore clarification over the years as we worked with this part of the code. So I'm going to turn it over to Kyle Steele, who will walk through some more of the specifics of the code. And then after Kyle's done, we'll field any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tyler. Kyle, you must be out there somewhere. There's Kyle.
Can you see me?
Yep. Top of your head's cut off a little bit, but outside of that, I can see. There you go. Back up a little bit. There we go. Now we can see you.
First time doing this, so it's great to see everybody, albeit virtually. Let me just try to share my presentation with you. Are you able to?
Well, it looks like a good place to hunt deer, Kyle. The picture that we're seeing.
That's the top of Moscow Mountain. I'm having, it's not wanting to pull up my PowerPoint.
Okay, there you go. Now
You're
it's
up now,
there.
Kyle.
Now it's up there.
Are you able to see that now?
Yes.
Well, great. Like Tyler mentioned, we're excited to be before you tonight talking about a proposed ordinance amending Title V, Chapter 4 of Moscow City Code, which is titled our Water Regulations Code. Chapter 4 of the code specifies a number of provisions concerning the supply of water to each residence and business that is connected to our public drinking water system. So just a little bit of background, the city owns and operates a public drinking water system in accordance with the Idaho rules for public drinking water systems, which is overseen by the state of Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. And what's really fundamental to operating a system is having the ability to reliably and consistently measure not only the amount of water that we produce from our 5 drinking water wells, but also the water that we deliver to our system customers. And as Tyler indicated in his opening, staff really wanted to, when we went through this policy update, was to develop a regulatory framework for water meter installations that was consistent and logical for our city staff, and also provide flexibility where we could, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next few slides, but really where can we provide flexibility where it makes sense economically. The following, as you may have noticed in your packet, the proposed updates are to sections 4-2, 4-3, 4-7, and 4-8 of Title V, Chapter 4. So section 4.2 contains a lot of new updates. Subsection A has 2 exclusions to the meter requirement, and that's for water use that's required for system operations and water that's used for firefighting purposes. We took what is currently existing in section 4.3 of the code and revised that and modified that and condensed that. And so that's what's now in section B, subsection B. Subsection C clarifies where we would ideally like meters located, and also talks a little bit about installation requirements that those new meters need to be installed in accordance with our construction drawings. Subsection D contains a provision that we provide sufficient water flow to maintain adequate system pressure to every premises within the city of Moscow, and which that's, like I said, is in accordance with the Idaho rules for public drinking water systems. There's a reference to IDAPA 580108, which is the administrative rules that DEQ oversees. Subsections E and F clarify our how we want to move forward with fire lines and not allowing meter installations off of those fire lines. So we worked on a case last year with the county courthouse. We were able to address that issue, and going forward, we not only like to make sure that's implement or not allowable, but also to address those circumstances when they come up in the future. And so you'll see that language in subsection F. And then finally, subsection G states that the city of Moscow will not read or maintain private water meters. Section 4.3 really has to do with meter classifications and install requirements for all the different uses that we see, single family and multifamily residential properties, commercial and mixed use buildings, public use buildings, mobile manufactured home parks, as well as we've got a couple of provisions in there regarding irrigation and deduct meters. So with regards to single family residential class, the proposed amendments would require each individual property to have a water meter installed. It also states that metered water service lines may not extend to serve another property. Meters must be installed in accordance with our construction drawings, but it allows some flexibility for potential properties that are subdivided or divided in the future. They could be allowed to place additional meters if certain criteria are met concerning things like minimum static pressures in the distribution system, flow requirements. Regarding the multifamily residential classification, the proposed code would require each building to have at least one individual meter that does not take water from another metered line. But it would allow for central metering of more than one building in, for example, a bigger apartment complex that's under single ownership would be allowed to, that would be permitted as long as there's a dedicated service line to each of those buildings with a shutoff valve, so we can control that. Subsections C and D of this section, section 4.3, contain the same language concerning commercial, mixed use, and public use classes. That proposed language would be that each building have at least one individual meter that does not take water from another metered line. Central metering of more than one building in a complex under single ownership would be permitted as long as there's a dedicated service line to each building with a shutoff valve on each line, which is again consistent with that language you see under the multifamily residential class. And then when central metering is selected by that property owner, again allowing for that flexibility. The highest applicable commercial use rate would be applied toward their sewer bill calculation. I think later on you're going to be talking a little bit about the water and sewer rate study, and this is one of the proposals that we have under the mixed use category as a staff preferred alternative to address these mixed use situations. If a property owner does desire distinct rates for different building uses, then they would be required to meter those uses separately. Mobile home and manufactured home parks, those shall be metered at the location where the private water distribution system attaches to our drinking water system. And then this slide, I've combined sections 4.7 and 4.8, but section 4.7 allows for the provisions for the relocation and abandonment of a meter. It also allows for an it gives guidance and a language for staff to evaluate the potential for upsizing and downsizings of meters. And then section 4.8 includes some language about the ability for system customers to request that their temporary suspension of their water service. I know I kind of went through that fast, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have. I don't know if Tyler mentioned this or not. I may not have heard him, but Mike Parker, our water utility manager, is also virtually here as well. And so he can help answer any questions that you might have. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. I'll get the council back up here so I can see. Zach, we need to get back to the council screen. Kyle, you need to get rid of the question thing so I can see council on my virtual screen so that I can call on them. Nope, I'm not quite sure what you need to hit. There we go, Kyle. Thank you very much. Okay, I see Gina's got her hand up.
I had a question, and I probably already know the answer, but I want to verify that I'm as brilliant as I think I am. When you place a meter on a line, I noticed that you had specified where the mobile home park meters go. It's where they join the municipal water system. What's the criteria for placing it anywhere else? I mean, I don't know why you specified it here and I didn't hear it anywhere else. So there's a question in there somewhere, Kyle, or Tyler, whoever.
Okay.
Yeah, Gene, I can fill that one for you. So the mobile home park, the distinction there is that there is language within the code that talks about meter location for a commercial, a single family. The specific provision for the mobile home park is that we will have a single meter for the mobile home park. And why that's important is often, if you think about kind of the nature of a mobile home park, there are multiple units within a system. And so they're actually a separate small system typically. And so what the code distinguishes is that we will meter at the point that you come off of our system and go into your system, so that we have a really clear point of delineation between the mobile home park system and our system, so that we don't end up with water lines on private property within a system that we can't maintain. And so we wanted to have that clear point of delineation between what is the city of Moscow system and then where is the point of delineation of the mobile home park system.
So the difference there being that they're separate units rather than like an apartment complex where that would just be one potentially.
Right. Yes, exactly. We want to clarify that since there are multiple units, that at this point where you come off our system, this is where it now becomes yours.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
Kyle.
Well, if I may just add to that, Gina, we may have multiple meters. For example, the mobile home park right off of Allman, mobile home park has a number of meters that feed it. So it's just how does it logistically work to feed the whole system?
Okay, so when you say that you have multiple meters in another mobile home park, is that basically kind of one that was done a long time ago that you did that way, or under a different amendment to the code? Help me understand that, because I was there and now I don't understand anymore.
Well, I just wanted to, we out there right now, existing in our system, we have, they're extensive. There's some that we may have one connection to the public drinking water system. For example, Empire Mobile Home Park has one connection, and they distribute that way. For example, Robinson, we have 4 distinct taps, and it's extends. I'm not sure how far Robinson extends, north to south, but it's quite a ways. And so there was multiple taps off of our system.
And that was size related then, right? I mean, that's
Right,
a fairly
correct.
big.
Yeah,
difference. Okay.
Gary's got his hand up too. I'm going to go to Gary and then I'll come to you, Art, after Gary's explaining.
Yeah, Cal's exactly right. It is a matter of getting enough supply to the large mobile home park. Robinson's was also developed in phases, so their water systems were completed in each discrete phase, and the system would have been too big to have a single meter on it. So it was easier just to take it as each phase was developed to develop a different system.
Can I follow on with that, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Please?
Then I'm going to go to Art.
So if the size of a future mobile home park is comparable to that of Robinson, would we approach it potentially that same way if it's phased that way? Or does this make us have one?
Gina, yeah, what this does is it says that any place where they connect to our public system, which is the case, but that has to be a metered connection. That we have to have that point of delineation and a meter connection. So possibility that you could have a multi-phase, multi-family development that has those connections. And so this specifies that there's that point of delineation for each of those.
Okay. Okay,
All
that
right.
doesn't limit us to one. It's just, okay, I get it. Thank you.
Arthur.
Yeah, concerning section 4.3, especially under the D, could you explore a little bit with me what it means when it says have at least one individual meter that does not take water from another metered line? And then I'll have a follow-up on that, but what issue exactly is that addressing?
So yeah, Art, with that one, what we have to address is that we want a single feed line to a single meter. If we have a bunch of intertied, so for example, we have some buildings in town currently where we have a lot of intertied plumbing with multiple meters, and the problem that you run into with that is if we need to do a shutdown and there's no good way to shut it down because there's no knowledge as to what meter serves what area, then it can become a real problem for us for maintenance. And so what that intends to do is just say each meter serves an area. So if you have a meter, it is a dedicated line serving something and not intertied with a whole bunch of other metered lines, which kind of defeats our purpose of being able to shut off and do maintenance and repairs.
Okay, so here's the follow-up then. On some of the older buildings downtown, you've got one meter serving a building with multiple uses in it. And it says further on that if the owner wants to, they can have individual meters. So does that mean that the entire building gets replumbed, or is that a case of you could have sub-metering within that 1 meter? How does that, what seems to be kind of a conflict, how does that measure up?
So that was actually kind of the condition that we were in previously, Art, where we had, we would have situations where someone would want to do a remodel of a portion of a building, and we would say, okay, then you have to, especially on some of these old existing buildings downtown, you have to redo all the plumbing because our previous codes required a single meter for a single space. And so what this now does is it gives the owner the option to say, you know what, it makes more sense for me to pay the top applicable rate. So let's just say, for example, an owner went in where there used to be one large office space. They decide they want to divide that into 2 distinct office spaces with 2 distinct clients in there. With our previous code, it would require them to then go in, have a plumber rip through everything if they could, bifurcate the system, and put in 2 meters. With this code, the owner could look at it and say, you know what, I'm a single owner. I'm going to charge my rents appropriately. These are the same uses, so I'm not that worried about it because it's the same rate within the system. And so we're just going to have the 1 meter that serves those uses. And so it allows for that flexibility for that very situation.
Yeah, but where does it come in with the owner having the option of putting in multiple meters? Would the multiple meters have to join the main water line outside the building? Or is it because that would be in conflict with you can't have a meter from a meter?
That's right, Art. If the owner decided that it made more sense for them to have a separate connection, then they would go out and tap a separate connection. Now we do have provisions, so like there are sometimes where there's not the space there might be some space constraints that make it difficult to get a meter, for example, out in the sidewalk or out in the street. And so that we do have provisions where we will allow for the meter to be placed internally, but that goes back to that dedicated service line. If they decide that that's what they want to do, then that's the route they'd have to take. And I'd like Kyle and Mike provide any clarifications if they think I'm missing anything on that.
Okay. Well, I got to, I'll come to you just in a second, Brandy. Maureen, are you out there somewhere? I lost you on my screen. There she
Okay,
is.
so
Okay.
the dog pulled my cord, I lost my connection, and when I got back on, I didn't realize that I was mute and I didn't have any visibility. Thank you, Bill, for pointing that out to me.
Okay, well, I thought we lost you. Just want to make sure you're there. Brandy, I'll go to you.
I'm
You
still
had
here.
a question.
And I think it was this single family residential. One of the requirements is that every property has to have a meter. My question is, are there many that do not have a meter out there right now?
No, I mean, we don't have single family properties that generally the reason for that provision in the code, Brandy, is so that somebody doesn't say you have a big enough lot that you could subdivide a lot. And so you could create a flagpole lot behind your home and create a separate lot. What we don't want people is under separate ownership jumping that same water line from one house to another house. And so the intent of that is to specify that if it's a single family lot under separate ownership, then it's got to have its own meter.
Okay, Brandy, a follow-up?
One other. Yeah, thank you. A different question. So can you talk a little bit about what you meant about private meters? Can just define that where you said the private meters won't be kind of the city doesn't have anything to do with them?
So there could be situations where somebody decides that they want to meter privately. So let's say, for example, somebody comes in and there's single ownership of a large, say a condominium building. And so there's single overall ownership of the shell of the building, but there's private ownership within the building of different stalls in the building. So there could be one large meter that meters that building, but the homeowners association or the developer may say, you know what? If for reasons of equity amongst the owners within our shared space, we want to have private metering so we can divvy out the water bill accordingly. And they can do that. They can set that up. They can set up metering. And so there may be a number of reasons that a developer, a property owner themselves may want to privately meter within their building itself. It's just we won't require that, and they'll just get one bill from us, and this is their bill, and they can deal with it how they will.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions from council? We'll take direction. Okay, I had Gina, and then Brandy. Gina.
Well, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Please. I move that we approve the proposed ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
I'm guessing, Brandy, you wanted to be the second on that?
Sure, I can be a second, and then we can discuss, because I did have another question, but I'm happy to second that so we can continue our discussion.
Okay, we got a motion by Gina and a second by Brandy. But further discussion, you've got the floor, Brandy.
So if someone, let's say in these old buildings, wanted to look into putting their own meter in, how do they even go about, can the city give any guidance of what that might even cost, or are they on their own?
It's so very dependent on specific situations. And so it is something that plumbers are familiar with. And so, a plumber would have to come in and, a lot of it depends on the size of the meter, the age of the pipe, the accessibility of the area where the meter is desired to be put, separation of the internal plumbing in order to be able to meter a specific space that isn't interconnected with the rest of the building. So it'd be impossible to really to give a range as far as that goes, it really would be just an activity someone would engage a plumber and have them look at.
Okay, Kyle.
Just to add to that, Brandy, so like Tyler was talking about, it depends on the service line that's going to be coming into that. And so a lot of that information regarding general facility charges is in our fee resolution. So that component is known. The plumbing, as Tyler talked about, and those other potential issues is that's always hard to understand and to estimate.
Okay. Other discussion from other counselors before I call on the motion? Did you have something, Ann, or were you just scratching your hair? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, we've got a motion by Gina and a second by Brandy to approve the proposed ordinance under the suspension of the rules, requiring 3 complete and separate readings and to be read by title and published by summary. I'll start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Maureen?
Aye.
Gina?
Aye.
And Ann?
Aye.
Okay, and what we've got here is we've got an ordinance number 2020, and this ordinance, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Codes Title 5, Chapter 4, relating to water regulations, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Thank you very much, Tyler and Kyle, and Gary's got something he wants to add in.
Yes, I would note, Your Honor, that the ordinance number is 2020-06.
Okay, 2020-06 was the ordinance I just read. I did not have that before this evening, so thank you, Gary. Thank you, Tyler and Kyle. And Mike, we didn't hear from you, so thank you for joining us as well. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 9, which is 2020 Weight and Sewer Rate Study Discussion and Recommendation. And Gary, you had the floor, and I seem to miss an Ann and Maureen too, again.
You want to wait for the discussion till we get them back?
Have you got a call in, Zach, from? Okay, well, Zach is getting them. Zach says they're there somewhere. We just don't have video of them, so
Okay.
we can go ahead and start the discussion. They're going to pop up here in a minute, I guess. So go ahead, Gary.
Okay, thank you. I see Ann is back according to my screen. Thank you, Your Honor. What we're here to talk about tonight seems to be a big utility evening. We're going to talk about sewer rates. As you know, we've been embarking on a water sewer rate study over about the last 2.5 years. We do water, sewer, and sanitation rate studies typically every 5 to 6 years. They come to a rate that Idaho code requires that rates that we charge for services, water, sewer, sanitation, that the value of the service must be reasonably related to the cost of the service charged to the ratepayer. So in order to come to what is a fair and equitable rate, we've retained a firm called FCS Group who has helped us. This will be our 3rd comprehensive water and sewer rate study. And the second one is 6 years old. We're in the last year of the rates that were recommended and adopted by the council from that study. So a lot of things go into the consideration of setting a rate. And those things are typically the operating expenses of the utility and the capital improvement expenses, maintenance expenses as well, go for that utility as well. So you've got your capital side and you've got your operational side. Typically what happens is in advance of a rate study, we update our capital improvement program so we are sure that whatever is outlined for expansions of the utility, replacement of worn components of the utility, so on and so forth, are estimated, given a certain timeline when the work needs to be done, and then we get current estimates of what it will cost to do that work. Operationally, we've got a couple of things that go into that. We have a comprehensive water plan and a comprehensive sewer plan, as well as a comprehensive city facilities plan. You take these plans and you go through them and look at where your utility is based upon things like the age of the utility, replacement components of the utility, what the expansion of your utility is expected to be based upon the expansion of your city. So if you've got a growth rate in the city of, say, 1.5% population per year, and then you would work that component into your rate study. Based upon that, you look at all those components and put them all together and try to come up with a number that will yield enough funding that you're able to operate the utility as it needs to be operated, and you're able to do the capital improvements, the capital part of the utility as well. So we prepared for this rate study. Last year, our capital improvement program comprehensively across the city was launched for the entire city, and the capital improvement program for water and sewer utilities were updated at that same time. So we went through that and looked at the equity of the rates to determine if all classes of users were being treated fairly. I want to focus today on the sewer rates because that is what we're asking the council to give us direction on tonight. The sewer rates, as we talked about, there is a capital component and there is an operational component. The other things that go into the way a utility works is you typically have a base rate. The base rate is the basic, what it costs to run the system, day in and day out. So you've got your base rate covering those components, and then you have a consumption rate. Base rate is charged the same to everybody within the same rate class every month in your utility bill. And then the consumption component is how much you individually use or impact that utility. For instance, a water residential rate, you have a base rate, then you have a tiered rate structure, which elevates your rate based upon the amount of water you use. That's the basics of our conservation-based water rate. In sewer rates, residential users or ratepayers, customers, are charged the same rate without regard to how big their house is, how many people live within the house, whatever. Business rates or business sewer rates are set according to classes. Those classes are set based upon the impact to the sewer system, the water reclamation and reuse facility, and what the sewage that is discharged from those individual business classes impacts how that system works. So for instance, you may have an office that has a single bathroom and a single sink that does not generate a lot of loading or pollutants in its discharged wastewater. On the other hand, you might have an industrial user or a user that discharges wastewater that is loaded with fats, oils, and grease, which really puts an impact and a burden on the water reclamation and reuse facility. Increased maintenance, you have to treat the water differently because it is a lot more potent, if you will, when it gets to the water reclamation and reuse facility. Our previous water or sewer rate for business classes is set up with a heavy component. Well, let me go back to the last water and sewer rate study. During that study, we did an analysis to determine that all the business classes were paying an equitable share of the impacts they were having on the sewer system. At that time, it was determined that restaurants were not generating enough money for the impacts that restaurants were having on the system. So during that rate study, there were some components that were approved by City Council to bring the restaurant rate to a point where it was actually paying for the services that were being given to the restaurants. And of course, most of that was taken up in the base rate, although the consumption rate was increased as well. So there were some fairly significant rate adjustments during the second water and sewer rate study. In reviewing the equity in those classes at this point, and there was a business that came to City Council a couple of months ago and indicated that I'm a restaurant, I run a restaurant, I don't have a lot of impacts, I don't discharge a lot of fats, oil, and grease, but my base rate is the same as a much larger restaurant down the street. So I'm paying the same base rate as that larger restaurant. Now, the consumption rate for the smaller restaurant, they're not discharging as much wastewater as the larger restaurant, balances it a little bit, but it's disproportionately places a burden on the smaller restaurant that isn't using the capacity of the system. Especially as that restaurant owner indicated, that restaurant wasn't discharging very much fat, oil, and grease because they don't have a deep fat fryer or any of those things that you might typically see in a restaurant. So looking at it, the base rate itself was something that likely needed to be looked at. So FCS Group looked at that along with city staff. Again, when you split out the cost of running a utility to base rates and consumption, you want to make sure that you have a good balance. The very conservative way to approach a utility is to have a large base rate because that's money you can count on day in and day out. It doesn't vary a lot. Consumption can vary quite a bit, as in the tiered water rate that we talked about a few moments ago. A resident can really impact the amount of money they pay in water rates by conserving water and just not using as much water. So we looked at that same model in looking at these sewer rates and determined that perhaps it should be balanced a little the other way, that maybe there was too much dependence on base rates so that everybody was paying the same no matter what size or consumption you had, and maybe put more of the emphasis or balance it a little more toward consumption. So that is something that this is being proposed in this rate study. One of the other things that we looked at, FCS was asked about as well, is we have 8 separate business classes in our sewer rates at this point. That makes it fairly complex to split those out. We're asking for council direction to enact a 3-level commercial rate. Those 3 levels, and if I get my number here, it is commercial low, commercial medium, and commercial high. And again, those different classes are set up based upon the loading of the sewage discharge from each of those business classes, so that the costs of operating and capital for the sewer system can be maintained while maintaining equity within the system. So with that, staff put together a sewer rate video that I hope you've all had a chance to look at. As I indicated to a couple of council members previously, we think it's fairly explanatory. We would have put it out for public consumption at this point, but if the council does not want to move forward with this proposal, then it would only serve to confuse. One of the things that we're looking for tonight is for council to allow us the direction to move forward. We're about to impanel our Citizens Rate Committee, and the Citizens Rate Committee comprised of about 8 to 10 ratepayers across the spectrum. There will be city council representation, et cetera. And that rate study committee will look at the proposals, review them, and recommend to council those rates. So that's where we are today. We're a little bit rushed because we were ready to move ahead about 7 or 8 weeks ago, but the COVID-19 crisis kind of hit us between the eyes. And so we are ready to go at this point, and we're looking for direction from the council that we can move ahead.
Gary, that video that staff put together was just an excellent video, and I do hope all counselors did see that and view that. I think that'd be an excellent video for the general public to see, but of course, that'll depend on what the council here does. So with that, questions from council?
I would note as well, I'm sorry, that Kyle Steele is here, Tyler Palmer certainly can answer any questions that you have.
Brandy raised her hand first. Brandy, you got the floor.
How will it be, is there a definition for low, medium, and high classifications, or is that going to be part of the committee that's formed?
I would ask Tyler to answer that.
Tyler.
Yeah, Brandy, we have some of the initial classifications set out. As Gary mentioned, the difference between water and sewer is that water, there is technology and it's relatively easy to just quantify the volume that's going into somewhere. Sewer, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to just meter the volume and the strength of the sewage that's leaving a facility. But it takes quite expensive testing to get down to brass tacks of exactly what's going out of a space. But luckily, there's quite a bit of consistency nationwide for types of businesses. So, for example, a supermarket isn't going to be drastically different from a different similarly sized supermarket that has similar amenities. Like, they're going to be Safeway versus Rosars is not going to be this massively different strength of effluent. And so we are able to take some of those national standards that have been developed and make some categorization. So some of the initial categorization work has been done, but that is part of what we're refining now, and we'll further refine through our work as we work through the rate committee and come back to the council with a final proposal.
Art.
Yeah, this might be a case of hand-holding for me, but given the change in classifications from 8 categories down to 3 for the commercial, I'm assuming this is a sequencing thing that the rate commission will look at to maintain both the funding for the capital improvements as well as the operations, and tailor the fees relative to what's needed to fund the operation despite the shrinkage of the number of categories.
You hit it right on the head, Art. That's really, when you look at a utility, we are constantly working to be as efficient as possible. And something that Gary is always hammering home on us is we have to be as efficient as we can possibly be. But once we have carved down to as efficient as we can be, there's a fixed cost to running these critical services, period. There's just what it costs. And, there are a lot of examples around the country and some here locally where it's easy to get behind on those and say, well, we'll put off that, we'll put it off. It's really easy to say that water line will last one more year, that sewer line will last one more year. And then all of a sudden you're faced with having to double rates over a course of a very short period of time just to catch back up. And that's really difficult to do. So like anything, routine maintenance on these systems is imperative. And so once we've identified what those costs are, you're spot on, Art, that there's those costs don't go away. So it's not a matter of, okay, this just poof disappears. It's a matter of how do we make sure the goal is to have the rates reflect the use of the system to the maximum extent possible. And as Gary indicated, what we feel comfortable at this point proposing is skewing that a little bit more back to consumption. There are some benefits because it can help us with promoting water conservation programs, fog programs. But in addition, it helps us dial in a little closer to what is your actual impact on the system and what are you actually using?
Maureen.
This may be another question I think it's a pretty easy question, but I don't understand it. In terms of rates, we now have 3 categories. Is there a range within each category, or is there just a set amount? If you're in category 1, it's going to be X dollars. If you're in category 3, it's going to be Y dollars. So
that's a good question, Maureen. So we currently have 8 We have 8 different categories, and we're proposing the 3. And the base rate within that category, it's not on a sliding scale. So
Right.
the base rate is consistent. So if you're a commercial low, you would pay the same base rate as all the other commercial lows.
Mm-hmm.
With the understanding that for example, let's take the commercial high. The commercial high would be, the equivalent of like the restaurant rate within our current rate structure, which has a base rate of $309. In the proposed structure, that base rate is likely to go down to something more like $90. And then there'll be an adjustment in consumption that would make up for that. We're still dialing that in, and that's a process that we get. But just for example, so there'll be less base rate, but everybody within that tier will pay the same base rate. And so where we see the variation or the sliding scale is on the consumption side, which we're trying to steer more toward.
Right, so everybody who's in that the category of high will in fact all pay the same base, but consumption will be individualized.
That's exactly right.
There we go.
Gary.
And when you say individualized, it means it's the same consumption rate, but you pay by the amount of consumption you yourself use. And I would note to the council as well, as the rate study committee goes through this, and FCS and staff has already done some of this work, there will be adjustments of rates between the system that we have now with one that would be represented by this change. You can't have the cost of operating the system, the cost of the capital improvements is fairly consistent. You lay it out and you've got something that you're trying to achieve. Those costs don't vary. So if within the system, one ratepayer is paying too much, that means that their rate needs to come down somehow, and then that needs to be spread over the rest of the rates. So you can't come to equity. You've got to have equity within the system is what I'm trying to say. And that's what this is intended to do.
Okay, Brandy.
So a little more about the low, medium, high classification. So with Gary and the introduction and specifically talking about restaurants, so that's one, this would be new rather than having the single rate. They may fall in the low, the medium, or the high. Will that require that the city staff visit the different restaurants? Is this something that will be discussions with the rate committee to decide how that initial classification is determined?
What would happen, Brandy, is there will be categorization based on uses. So there are those national averages for uses. And so a restaurant would be automatically classified into the commercial high. But then what we will have, which we haven't had before, is we will have a process by which somebody can dispute their categorization. So somebody can come in and say, hey, look, I think you guys have got it wrong. This isn't the type of business I run. I'm a coffee shop, but I do no food production. I'm just making coffee. There's no cooking. There's no whatever. I think the categorization is wrong. And so then we'll have a process by which they can provide data that could show that they may merit a reclassification. But the other benefit, just to point out, and this is likely redundant, is that even with that happening, somebody who was categorized as commercial high, but is a far lower use. So the small restaurant who comes in and is producing nowhere near what Wendy's, let's say, is producing in a day, that will be reflected because of the consumption aspect of the bill. So with the lower base rate and then the consumption aspect, their bill, that is a category that would see a reduction in their bill.
Yeah, thank you. And I that just kind of the little light bulb went off. I know you kind of are repeating that, but the fact that the base rate for those high users is going significantly down and more of the costs are reflected on use kind of automatically works some of that out. So thank you.
That's right.
Gina, I'll get to you in a second. Ann, you had a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. So I was confused about this. So the possibility for commercial, low, medium, high, that is the potential base rate, right? That is not referring to consumption. Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder, what are the 8 classifications that we have now?
Give me just a second and I will, I've got a document ready that I can pull that up for you.
Thank you, Tyler.
Your Honor, Kyle Steele had a comment.
Oh, okay, Kyle. Let's let Kyle throw this out there while we're waiting for.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Just to add to what Tyler was talking about in regards to Brandy's question, we anticipate sending out a mailer probably next month. The Idaho DEQ is requiring us to conduct an industrial user survey, and we anticipate sending with that a classification sheet letting the community know, depending on the direction from council tonight, but letting them know where they likely would fit within that classification system, and then some educational language in there about those different categories of commercial.
Jane, I'll go to you while we're waiting for that other answer.
Okay, I see a potential pile of confusion and potential frustration in this area. I think that it still is murky for me, even after Brandy's clarification and Ann's clarification. And I really hope that we, in this process with the committee, that we look at not just automatically putting people in at commercial high, because I think that will freak a lot of people out. Then they'll have to figure out, okay, wait, now I can go dispute it and take a lot of time away from kind of already not so lovely moments. That's just going to add more time and more frustration and confusion. So if there is a way that we could either preliminarily assign people based on, I don't know. You know, you were talking, Tyler, about national averages for a coffee house. That's very different than a Mexican restaurant. You know, I really would like to see us do a little bit of the legwork ahead of time. Not that we haven't, but let's not just lump everybody into one and put the onus on the businesses to dispute it. Please.
Tyler, did you find those 8 rates?
You know what? Is that something, Ann? Can I send that to you later? Or is that I can search it now? I don't have the document up that I thought I did.
One thing I will say to all counselors is one of the reasons we're doing this is because to make it more equitable for everyone and to try to make it a little bit more simplistic, not necessarily confusing, but simplistic. If you've got 3 rates rather than 8 rates, and then those rates are a certain rate, but then the rest is based on consumption, the big users are the ones that are going to pay the most money. Isn't that correct, Tyler?
Yes, that's precisely right, Mayor.
And I think with the committee going forward, they'll be looking at this, and let's say you get one of the rates, you're one of the higher tier ones, but you get charged just $99 a month, but your low end of the consumption, that bill may not be that much more or higher, but then somebody that does use a lot of consumption could be $300-400. Am I correct on that? Yeah, okay. Maureen had her hand up. We've switched things around, and I'll come to you, Sandra, next.
Okay, this goes back to the kind of something the mayor just said, and that is there going to be much differential on the baseline for the 3 different categories?
There will be a far smaller spread of differential than our current system, Maureen. So currently we have a pretty broad spread between base rates. So if you go from residential up to the highest, which is the restaurant rate, you know, the restaurant rate is something like 10 times what the residential rate is. We won't have anywhere near that spread in the proposal. So yes, it will be a far smaller spread.
Okay, so basically though, what it really depends on is the consumption, and is there a real easy way for you all to assess how much consumption or how someone uses?
It's water.
Can you go to a meter? I mean, can you go to a meter and say, is there a meter out there?
It's their water bill, because ultimately what ends up going down the drain comes through the water meter.
But how do you distinguish if it has oil in it or it's just like shower water?
So those are what are distinguished by those national averages. So there aren't a lot of showers in a restaurant, but there is a lot of oil. And so the residential strengths versus the restaurant strengths versus like a supermarket versus like a coffee shop, there have been tests that have been done nationwide where they'll actually over a period of time just continually take drop samples from those types of businesses. And then they're able to establish those averages of some of the things that we're looking for, like dissolved solids, like fats, oils, and grease, all of those things that add cost to that treatment process. And so those over the decades have been very well established and routinely updated as those averages across the country for what those types of businesses generate.
So basically, you're going to use national averages and you're not going to go and test everybody's sewer water.
That's right. National averages for the strength, and then the volume is determined by their water meter. And so the water actually goes into the facility.
Gotcha.
Sandra.
So, Tyler, thanks. I'm trying not to second guess myself because this makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like maybe I might be missing something, but I'm just going to go with it. It makes a lot of sense for now. My question for you is, are there other cities in Idaho that are using this this type of model with just the 3 classifications and the smaller base and then determining on consumption? And if so, how's that working out for them?
So Maureen, as part of this proposal, so as Gary mentioned, this is something we've been in the process of for a couple years. You know, playing rates is not something we take lightly. It's something that really has to be cautiously done. And as part of that process, both internally with our staff and with our consultant, we took a look at a lot of different examples around the country. And our current system with the number of categories we have is actually anomalous. It is far more common to have fewer categories and to weigh it more toward consumption when we went through our comparison. It's far more commonly done around the country. So the way that we're proposing it is the more common approach now. And if I may, a big thanks to Mia. I believe that I have now got the different rate categories. So if you guys want to continue with the questions, I'll be able to answer Ann's question.
Well, Brandy, I'll go back to Brandy.
Well, I just kind of wanted to add on. I think that we've been leading up to this thinking of the problem of restaurant because of a citizen concern and complaint that has very low load being charged this high rate. And so we're kind of adjusting that even though that restaurant may start in that high category, that base rate is going to be so much lower than what it is right now. So they will probably be a lot happier. And if their water consumption is also low, even though they may have the base rate of a high category, their bill is going to be significantly lower than it is right now. So I think some of it is just adjusting to that word high does not mean necessarily a very big base rate the way that it does right now when they're in that restaurant category.
Actually, a better way of rating it is a 1, 2, 3, and don't say low, medium, high, just a 1, 2, 3, and I think everybody would get it. Okay, Tyler, have you got information there?
Yes, I am ready. Okay, Ann, so the 8 categories that we have bars and taverns, restaurants, other commercial, small commercial office with irrigation, mixed use service, and then we've got, the University of Idaho is its own kind of thing, and the Southeast Moscow Sewer District are their own thing. And then the sub rates within that, there's some sub rates within the mixed use service. And then there's the small office without irrigation as well.
Wait, one more question.
Maureen, did you have something?
Yeah, this goes back to what the complaint was. Sorry, I'm moving around because my computer keeps losing its power.
I was wondering what you were doing.
I know. So there's the problem with that. Anyway, so here goes the problem, Tyler. And my sense is that I want to say thank you all for the amount of work that went into this and the study and the research and all the rest of that. It's very well and really well prepared. The question is just making sure that we all understand it. But the woman that we had that made the complaint was one unit inside of a bigger building. And the question there is, do you tap the water usage for that whole building based on the individual people in there or the complex itself?
So the kitchen counter complaint that was received is actually a single metered building. So the only occupant of that building is that restaurant. And so in her case it's pretty straightforward. It's just the water that goes into that building. There's no irrigation. There's no landscape, no nothing. So the water that goes into that building is for the restaurant. In the cases of mixed use, that is where there is some nuance. And in the video, Ty explains this a little bit, but where there's the challenge that we really had to get creative and think about, okay, how do we make this fit? It's a lot easier for future development, because with future development, we say, okay, here's the rules that are in place. Here's how you're going to want to approach this. With existing, we do have some buildings, like let's take, for example, the McConnell building that has Mingles in the basement and then apartments up above. And the Mingles actually has it's a bar with a restaurant inside. Another example would be the Moscow Hotel that has a bar, the garden within it, and then it has some retail and some residential. And so in those situations where what we're proposing is that we have an estimated rate. So we know we have an estimated rate for how much on average those types of units use. So like an office or residential. And so the proposal is that we would use those for those existing ones that we would grandfather in, which there's actually very few of them. We've only got, I believe it boiled down to nine total buildings in the city that would apply to. We would use those estimated rates so that, for example, the McConnell building wouldn't be paying the full restaurant. So they wouldn't be paying the commercial high for the entire building, because knowing that there's a certain amount of the water use that goes through that meter that goes to those residential units. And so there would be a deduction in our proposal of those, taking those average amounts, because it's not metered internally. Now that would be the option. Another option that's available to the business owner or to the building owner is to say, I don't want the estimate. I want to know specifically what my residential units are versus my restaurant and bar units. And at that point, they have the option of installing a second meter. So they could contact a plumber, get with us, we'll work with them. They'll get a meter installed. One of the things that we've discussed through this process, Maureen, is the potential of us waiving general facility charge fees for a finite period of time to allow some of those buildings to do that very work at a more affordable cost to them. So if they look at it and they say, hey, we really want to meter separately, then they could do that. They could install the meters and meter it separately. I know that's really convoluted. I hope that answers your question.
No, actually, you're really good at answering these questions.
Well, one of the things we're doing, we're getting kind of down into the weeds on a lot of this stuff, which is good, because this is what the discussion needed to be, in depth, and I think that we're doing a good job of that. Okay, well, how would Brandy?
Well, I think what I really like about this is that it simplifies things, and it actually does seem to tie more into actual usage, which I think is part of what has been problematic just recently. So I move to authorize staff to proceed with the proposed changes to business classifications in the sewer rate and proceed with the citizens rate committee process.
Sandra.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Brandy and a second by Sandra to authorize staff to proceed with the proposed changes to business classification in sewer rate and proceed with the citizens rate committee process. Did somebody speak while I was talking?
I did. Gina's trying to get your attention there.
Sorry.
What you need, Gina?
I have a question before we vote. So.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay. Remind me, please, what happens? They're going to go through this process, and then this will come back to us again?
Yes.
Okay. I'm really interested in it, but I'm also really interested in how we, where we land and how we go take this out to the community.
Gina, no fee or rate will be changed without this council's approval of it.
Excellent.
Simple as that.
Okay.
Gary?
Thank you.
Your Honor, I just wanted to mention too that the group of folks that the mayor is asking to sit on the Citizens Rate Study Committee represents the full breadth of these classifications. So restaurant representation, grocery stores, residential, business, citizens, and as I mentioned before, a council member as well. So we're getting that broad perspective that will work through this. And if somebody thinks that the rate that is being proposed is unfair, I guarantee you they will hear about it at the rate study committee.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Okay, with that, I'll reread the motion. Motion was made by Brandy and second by Sandra to authorize staff to proceed with the proposed changes to business classifications and the sewer rate and proceed with the Citizens Rate Commission process. And I will start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyler, Gary, and that video was excellent. I think, and I'm happy to see that get out on the website so people will be able to view it because I thought it was well done. And with that, Gary, we're going to move on to item number 10, City COVID-19 Response Report. Gary, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. We just met last Thursday, so I won't bore you with details of what happened before that. Suffice it to say that with the governor's stay healthy order and the guidelines for the Idaho rebounds and the protocols, staff was charged with beginning the process for the city to get back to business, if you will, what we're calling reopening protocols. I sent out some protocols to you today, which talk about interaction for social distancing, enhanced sanitation hygiene practices, mask protocols, personal protective equipment, limiting interactions, and maintaining a healthy workplace. One of the things that we're trying to do is to make sure that as we re-engage the public in our public buildings and in our programs, that everybody is as safe as they can possibly be. So with that in mind, we've got planning going on all over the place. One of the things that has been brought forward was, playgrounds was a big issue. Kids are home, they want to get out and play. When are we going to open up playgrounds? Playgrounds are not eligible to be opened up in stage 1 of the governor's plan, rebound or Idaho Rebounds program. So we're planning on opening those during stage 2 and putting together, our Parks and Rec folks are putting together plans in order to do that. Likewise, they're looking at youth activities and the ability to use our play fields to have competitions on. And not only that, if they're being used by non-city personnel, in other words, non-city sponsored programs, then we can make recommendations based on the governor's protocols. But essentially, the question is, the fields are open to be used, scheduled as in the past, and then the organization itself is the one that will set up those protocols. Did you have a question, Sandra?
Sandra.
I do, just really quick, Gary. When we're talking about opening the fields and the parks and the playgrounds, does that also include the restroom facilities?
Staff is working on a plan for that as well. And that's the thing that this whole protocol business is about, is if you've read the protocols, they call for youth activities to be pursued, but they've got some things you're supposed to do. Maintain social distancing as much as possible. And, just a whole lot of processes. So we're going through each one of those. And as you heard the governor talk about at his press conference last week, he talked about, in answer to a question about when state parks were going to be opened, and he talked about restrooms in state parks and how they'll have to have heightened sanitation procedures, so on and so forth. We're going through that same process on our parks and including the downtown restrooms. So all of that planning is going on, and if it is able to be opened up in stage 1, we'll put together protocols where people are protected as much as possible. and we will get those opened as soon as we can do so in a safe manner. If we aren't allowed to do that in stage one, then we will go with successive stages until we're able to do that. Let's see. So, as I said, that's Parks and Rec. We're trying to get city facilities opened again. As I mentioned, I think last Tuesday, we plan to open up City Hall within restrictions and the lobby of the police department this Wednesday, May 6th. One of the things that we're doing is we have a mask protocol for all of our staff. If they can't maintain social distance in their office, they're required to wear masks. If they're working in closer proximity than 6 feet of coworkers, they have to wear masks. And whenever they meet the public, the staff member must wear a mask. In addition, if the public is going to come into city buildings, we will have dispensers of one-time, one-use masks that people can use when they come in if they don't have a mask of their own. Again, the purpose for that is to protect not only the public, protect staff and our patrons as well. So we will have masks outside or just inside the door. And if you want to speak to a staff member or come into City Hall or the foyer of the police department, we will have masks for you to use. We've had a lot of our folks working remotely. Managers have been working with those folks. The governor's protocol or the governor's Idaho rebounds guidelines indicates that if you can work remotely, you should be able to do so through, if it's good for the business, I should say, be able to do so up through mid-June. So we are looking at our folks working remotely, first of all, to find out, is it safe to have them come back into the workplace? And are they getting efficient work done where they're working remotely? And we found that has worked pretty well for us. So we will begin to bring folks back. For instance, down in our utility billing department, we've got online utility billing. You can call, make telephone calls. At our permits counter, you can do that online, do it by telephone. So we are not opening up the man building in this first stage. So the reason we're not doing that is we have a system set up now that you can do 99% of the business online. And if somebody does not have the technology or wants to do it that way, they can call and get an appointment and get that personal service as well. So again, we're trying to do is be socially distant, try to protect both the public and staff as much as we can. In addition, we have plans. I have a 20-page document here that I will share with the council tomorrow that has a really in-depth staged approach for the city to open up again. Everything from, okay, how long are we going to have a mask protocol? Similar to the governor's Idaho rebounds plan. We'll go the first phase for about 2 weeks, see how that works. We'll spend the entirety of the second week analyzing and determining, okay, what worked, what didn't, how do we go to the next phase? So the idea is to have a systematic approach that should we find some issues cropping up, that we can deal with those issues as quickly as possible. So with that, again, we are working to, as soon as we can safely do some things, we are going to do them. One of the big issues, one of the big questions has been about the swimming pool again. So we are looking at the potential of opening that pool probably around the 1st of July. Again, a lot of planning has to go into that. I've heard, in fact, I was told today that the city of Boise was not going to open its pools this summer. I don't know how that's going to work, but it gets pretty hot in the Treasure Valley. It gets pretty hot in Moscow during the summer as well. And if we can open it safely and protect our people, the citizens, the users of the pool, we're going to do that. So with that, I'd answer any questions that the council has.
Well, I think, Gary, that all of us over this last 6 weeks have been ordained and indained on every single thing with COVID-19 that we possibly could know. And I'm sure there's going to be a few new quirks that come out there, but it's kind of nice to see us inching along and moving forward at a reasonable, smart pace so that we don't overwhelm the system. So thank you for all the work you've done on it, Gary.
Thank you. If I could have one more, I wanted to thank the Marines of the Palouse. They donated 300 disposable masks for that we will use for the public entering city facilities. So
very nice.
Just a great deal.
Yeah, very nice. Well, okay, folks. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn by someone.
Let's go.
Art, second. Maureen, all in favor, aye.
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 Okay, we are closed at 9:01. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice evening.